Hey guys, you're on the Films Recaps channel, and this is a Dallas Buyers Club movie. A sick electrician paired with a transvestite peddling an illegal AIDS drug.
I ain't no faggot, motherfucker. I don't even know no fucking faggot.
The film begins with the protagonist, Texas electrician Ron Woodruff, watching the rodeo from under the bleachers. Ron is not a bad guy. In addition to his main job, he acts as a cowboy and is no stranger to gambling, betting, drug use, and unbridled orgies. In fact, that's what he does in the first scene. He snorts powder and has fun with two women. Later, he is going to bet on how long one of his fellow ranchers will last on a bull. The plan fails and his body falls to the ground almost immediately. Ron escapes from the betting man, but they catch up with him outside. To get rid of the chase, he beats up a policeman who is actually his childhood friend, Tucker. After pretending to arrest the businessman, the cop gives his comrade a ride home. Getting out of the car, Ron almost falls over, but pretends that everything is alright. As soon as he enters the house, however, he falls to the floor and passes out, falling asleep into the night. The next day at work, Ron recklessly reaches into a fuse box with a screwdriver and gets electrocuted. Then he wakes up in the hospital. The two doctors, Dr. Savard and Dr. Sachs, have the most unpleasant news. In addition to traces of drugs, his blood showed a HIV infection, which causes AIDS. The doctors wondered if he had ever used intravenous drugs or engaged in homosexual sex. A simple Texas boy is insulted to the core of his soul by doubts about his inordinate masculinity. He is rude to the nursing staff who give him 30-day stops. People don't live longer in this condition. Ron proudly walks out of the hospital saying that the paramedics made a mistake by confusing his test with someone else's. But at a party with drugs and elements of an orgy, he refrains from promiscuity. His thoughts revolve around his diagnoses. This is noticed by his cowboy friend, to whom Ron tells him that he has been misdiagnosed with AIDS. A few minutes later, the character glances at the calendar and the number 30. That's exactly how long he has left. The next day he goes to the library to learn more about the disease, still not common enough in 1985. At the same time, the hospital arranges to conduct a clinical trial for a new drug for AIDS therapy, AZT. Hammering scientific articles and realize the extent of the tragedy, Ron returns to the hospital demanding to see Dr. Savard, but he is not there. But Dr. Sachs can see him. A woman, which at first displeases the rough and straightforward man, nevertheless he goes to the appointment and asks to be enrolled in AZT research program. But there is nothing the doctors can do. The appointment is distributed randomly and some of the patients will receive a placebo instead of the active ingredient. Realizing that he has little chance of surviving without his medication until the end of the trials, Ron asks to get the pills bypassed, but the doctor can only offer the support group. Upset, Ron goes to his favorite bar, where friends have already gathered. They suspect, however, that he has contracted the disease because of a same-sex relationship, which is not very welcome in the conservative South. It almost comes to a fight, after which the main character, offended in his best feelings, walks away. He goes to a support group meeting where he collects information and brochures about AIDS and almost beats up a gay man who talks to him. The man then seeks solace in the usual Texas things: a strip bar, alcohol, and prayer, all at once. This is also where he noticed a nurse from the hospital. Ron managed to talk him into stealing some of the experimental AZT to sell. For a while he uses stolen pills, drinking whiskey and snorting powder. At some point the shipments stop, the records become stricter. After taking the money for the last shipment from an exhausted Ron, the nurse gives him the address of a hospital in New Mexico that might be able to help. An enraged Ron tries to hit the nurse but misses and falls senseless. He wakes up in the hospital again after a blood transfusion. The doctors wonder how he got the drug, but Ron won't admit it. Here he also meets a transvestite, Rain. Dressed up like some underworld clown, Rain also has AIDS, and he passes as a test subject. Honestly, he sells some of the pills to wealthy acquaintances, at least some chance of prolonging his existence. Ron asks if he can sell them to him, but Rain refuses. He is already short of pills. Realizing that lying in bed waiting to die is boring, the man discharges himself from the hospital and goes home. Former friends have already left insulting messages on the walls, and the landlord has changed the lock. With a saved shotgun, Ron sneaks into his former abode, where he collects the remaining cash from all his stashes. Then he travels to Mexico. During the road, he stops to weep. Arriving at the address, he finds Dr. Was, the disbarred owner of an underground hospital. Instead of AZT, he uses alternative drugs that are less toxic to the body. After examining Ron's tests, the doctor forbids his use of drugs, prescribing vitamins and lesser-known drugs instead. After a 3-month course, the character feels better. Dr. Was discharged him, prescribing in the end the vitamin Zelstabin and injection of protein peptide T. This is how Ron has been treated all this time. Those will not be able in the US because they are not FDA approved. Then Ron realizes that he can make good money. He buys as much medicine from Was as he can fit in the trunk of his car and returns to Texas. Having worked out a canine plan before the border, Ron presents himself as a priest with cancer. He is detained but manages to convince the border guards that all the drugs in the car are not for sale, but for personal use. It's just that he is so sick that he needs a lot of medication. The ruse works. They let him through. Back home, Ron wanders into places where homosexuals congregated, offering them more effective drugs to fight AIDS. He is spotted by a former roommate, Ryan, who wants to buy a big batch, but suddenly changes his mind and gets out thinking that Ron is homophobe, not worthy of his money. In the mind of the wily Texan, mercantile interests conflict with deep-seated beliefs. The commercial side of course won out. Ron catches up with Ryan and offers him a share in the business if he helps with the clientele. The two of them start going around gay clubs selling contraband pharmaceuticals. Business picks up, and Ron rents several motel rooms for an office and overnight stay. To avoid trouble with the law, he stops selling drugs and organizes the Dallas Buyers Club, a charitable organization where drugs are given away for free, but only to members, and membership in turn already costs $400 a month. 2 months later, the club is expanding and business is booming. During this time, Dr. Sachs at the hospital is convinced by experience that Ron already knew from Dr. Was that the experimental AZT is toxic to patients. The medic is looking for Ryan, who hasn't come in for an appointment in a while. At his new home address, the doctor finds the club office and Ron, who by all accounts should have given up on God months ago. He tells how he helps people with uncertified drugs, but Dr. Sachs is strictly against this approach. Ron and Ryan's friendship grows stronger despite past disagreements. Ron even stands up for the transvestite when he meets a former friend in the store, but he actively disapproves of his addiction to cocaine, reprimanding a fellow trafficker for his careless attitude. In order to establish the supply of drugs, Ron flies to Japan to a chemical plant. Contrary to oral agreements on the phone, they refuse to sell him a large consignment. Allegedly, only a Japanese patient has the right to Japanese drugs. The American has to resort to subterfuge by hiring a Japanese businessman to place the order for him. After a long flight back to Dallas, Ron gets sick at the airport. He urgently injects himself in the bathroom with an imported drug, which nearly gives him a heart attack. He's rushed back to the hospital to see Dr. Severt. The situation is aggravated by the police interest in carrying medication, since they are so prohibited and the use of the first dose almost kills Ron. Therefore, the entire batch from his luggage is confiscated. There are no legal ways to get the goods back. That's why the businessman has to travel to Europe and Asia. Upon his return, Ron tells Dr. Sachs how he chooses drugs for himself and his brothers in distress. Anything is better than the toxic but AZT-approved ones. Imported medications help patients extend their lives far longer than doctors had hoped. Later, he invites the woman to a restaurant where he talks about his difficult journey and his struggle with the virus. However, the popularity of the club leads to the fact that Dr. Severt has no patients at all. He is forced to do some digging, and then the tax inspection checks Ron's office and confiscates all his supplies in the process. Amidst protests all over the country demanding faster approval of new drugs to treat HIV infections. On March 11, 1987, the FAD amended the law to allow sick people to take only medication prescribed by doctors. These amendments outlawed Ron's event. Now he cannot bring in drugs supposedly for personal use without a prescription. Before proceeding to resolve the issue, the man gives some of his supplies to police officer Tucker. They will help his father who suffers from Alzheimer's. Later, the club members suggest that Ron move into a vacant house where an office can be set up for free. Under the current circumstances, financially strapped Ron is happy to have such help. Immediately after moving, Ron and Rain go to a support group meeting, agitating to join their club and not to trust the pharmacist promoting ZT, essentially the only approved drug. Afterwards, Rain, who doesn't stop using drugs, goes to his father, who has abandoned his son because of his non-traditional orientation. The transvestite asks his father for money to financially support a friend with whom they were brought together by the same disease. After receiving money from his partner, Ron asks Dr. Sachs to write a prescription for him, but she refuses. This doesn't stop the cunning electrician. He flies to Mexico anyway, to see Dr. Vaz, where he procures new medications and gets an article about the toxicity and dangers of AZT. On the flight back, he fills prescription cards in the cabin. Ron had stolen them from Dr. Sachs on his last visit. At the airport, he is checked out, and by a strange coincidence, the names of all the patients are identical to the Dallas Cowboys team. However, the border guards can't prove anything, and the man is released. When he returns to the office, he learns that during his absence, Rain became ill and was taken to the hospital, where he was injected with AZT. That's what he ended up dying from. Ron searches for Dr. Savard, nearly beating him in front of his patients, but the guards intervene. In the evening, he gets drunk, thus commemorating a friend. After this incident, Ron launches a campaign against the FDA, lobbying for AZT and at the same time falling to the commission in court for banning the use of any drugs, even those not clinically tested but terminally ill people. He throws flyers around at the support group meeting while Dr. Sachs leaves them on the counter at the hospital. Because of all the organizational stuff, Ron forgets to refill his own supply of drugs. One morning he finds out he is out of them. He gets sick. He doesn't make it to the border before a seizure hits him. Wandering in the middle of the road, unconscious, the man is spotted by the police, but Tucker recognizes an old friend and takes him with him. At home, he injects medicine from the box that was meant for his father. 6 months later, Ron's lawsuit against the FDA takes place in San Francisco. Recognizing the right of the sick to fight for life by all means and the illogicality of oversight commissions, the judge nevertheless cannot get around the existing law. The lawsuit is dismissed. Ron returns to Dallas, where the people he is helping to survive are waiting for him. However, he is personally allowed to purchase peptide T for personal use. The drug allowed him to live for a while longer, even performing at the rodeo. The film ends with him trying to hold on to the galloping bull. The closing credits inform the audience that the real-life Ron Woodruff died of AIDS on September 12, 1992, on the 2557th day after his diagnosis. Yet the doctors gave him a maximum for 30 days. Instead of 1 month, he battled the disease for 7 more years, helping many more like him in the process.